The galaxy was full of stories, rumors, and warnings about a small blue planet tucked away in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. For centuries, other civilizations had watched from afar, curious but cautious. They had seen humans send ships beyond their solar system, explore distant stars, and return with knowledge that no one else seemed able to gather. But most dismissed these stories as exaggerations. Humans were young compared to most galactic civilizations. How could a species barely a few thousand years beyond primitive flight command fear across the stars? Yet there were signs, subtle but undeniable, that humans were not like the other species. Merchant ships and research vessels passing near human space often reported strange readings. Energy bursts, unmapped anomalies, and technology that defied known physics. Some of the observations were dismissed as sensor errors or miscalculations. Others were simply ignored because no one wanted to believe that a species they considered insignificant could be so powerful. One evening, in a council chamber aboard a massive orbiting station, representatives of multiple alien civilizations gathered. They were the Zalari, the Vorn, the Talarn, and several other races who prided themselves on centuries of exploration and dominance. Screens around the room flickered with images of human star systems. Analysts presented the latest intelligence reports, each more perplexing than the last. Another fleet has gone missing near the outer edge of human territory, one Zalari officer reported, his voice calm but tense. Sensors detected a massive energy spike followed by nothing. No debris, no distress signals, just silence. The room fell quiet. It was not the first time a fleet had vanished near human space, but the pattern was becoming harder to ignore. Every species in the galaxy had a story about humans, usually told in whispers. They were explorers, scientists, and traders on the surface, but their reputation for secrecy and strategic cunning was growing. A Vorn diplomat leaned forward. "Are we sure these disappearances are linked to humans?" she asked. Her voice was measured, but there was an underlying edge of fear. Could it be natural phenomena? Rogue asteroids? Space storms? Perhaps, another officer said. But the anomalies always occur near human-controlled systems. The patterns are too precise to be accidents. And every time, there is a brief window where sensor readings suggest intelligent intervention, some form of defense or attack, beyond anything we've encountered before. Whispers filled the room. Some refused to meet each other's eyes. It was rare for civilizations to admit fear, especially in a council chamber where pride and diplomacy ruled. But humans were changing the rules without ever firing a shot in anger. Outside, in the emptiness of space, human ships moved silently along the borders of their territory. They were sleek, efficient, and impossible to track with standard monitoring equipment. No alien fleet had ever approached close enough to get a clear reading. No one knew how many ships humans had or how advanced their technology truly was. Humans rarely displayed force openly, but the few who tried to probe the edges of their space never returned. The message was clear without words. Do not enter. Humans themselves were unaware of the fear they inspired, at least in its full scope. On Earth, scientists debated deep space anomalies. Engineers tested new propulsion systems, and strategists ran simulations of potential alien encounters. They prepared quietly, methodically, knowing that one day the galaxy would take notice. They were not cruel, nor were they seeking conflict. They simply valued survival, independence, and the right to explore without interference. Back in the council chamber, a Talarn strategist stood, his multi-limbed figure tense. "We need to send a message," he said. "We cannot allow this level of uncertainty to continue. If humans have such capabilities, we need to understand them. Ignorance is dangerous." A silence followed. It was one thing to theorize about human power in secret reports. It was another to confront it openly. No species wanted to risk another disappearance or provoke humans into retaliation, but the desire for knowledge, for control, outweighed caution in some minds. "Fine," said the council head. "A diplomatic fleet will approach, cautiously. We do not want war. We only want answers. Prepare the vessels and inform the crews. This mission will be historic." The alien fleets mobilized with careful precision. Ships designed for diplomacy rather than combat were selected. They were filled with scientists, translators, and observers. Every precaution was taken to avoid hostility, but deep down, every officer knew the stakes. Entering human space was a gamble, and none could predict the outcome. As the fleet approached the outer boundary of human territory, the sensors began to behave strangely. Readings fluctuated wildly. Systems registered energy signatures too complex to analyze in real time. Communication signals jammed intermittently, leaving the crews tense and uneasy. The humans were near but still invisible. It was as if the entire region of space itself belonged to them, and the alien ships were intruders in an invisible realm of control. Hours turned into a tense, silent vigil. Then, without warning, the lead Zilari vessel detected a sudden burst of energy. Lights flickered across the control panels. Alarms sounded briefly, and then in an instant the ship simply vanished. Panic spread through the fleet. Officers tried to re-establish communications only to find static and faint energy distortions. It was as if the ship had been erased from existence, leaving no trace. The analysts' worst fears were confirmed. Human defenses were beyond anything the galaxy had seen. Some ships wanted to retreat immediately. Others debated whether to continue, driven by pride and the desire to understand the humans fully. In the end, fear prevailed. The fleet withdrew, leaving human space untouched, silent and impenetrable. Back on Earth, nothing had happened. Humans continued their work, unaware of the precise moment when the galaxy had taken notice. They focused on exploration, on innovation, on the steady expansion of their knowledge and technology. And yet, the stories of vanished fleets, strange energy bursts, and silent warnings began to circulate. Across the stars, aliens began to whisper, "Do not enter human space." The fear was growing. It was not born of hatred or desire for conquest. It was born of respect, of the realization that humans were capable of things far beyond what anyone had imagined. They were young, but they were intelligent, adaptive, and extraordinarily precise. They had learned from history, from mistakes, and from observation. And now, quietly, they were asserting control over a corner of the galaxy without firing a single shot. In the quiet corners of alien space, captains and diplomats shared the same stories. Fleets that approached human systems vanished. Attempts at communication failed. Sensor readings revealed unimaginable complexity. Each tale reinforced the unspoken truth. Humans were to be avoided. Their space was forbidden. Their strength was not in sheer numbers or aggression, but in preparation, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively without warning. And so, the first chapter of humanity's reputation in the galaxy was written not with war or diplomacy, but with silence. Humans continued to explore, to build, to expand quietly, unaware of the fear they inspired. The galaxy had finally begun to understand that human space was not a place for the curious, the brave, or the reckless. It was a domain of calculated precision, guarded by a species that refused to be underestimated. The story of that first encounter spread slowly, through rumor and cautionary tale. Every civilization took note. Every fleet commander remembered the lessons learned. And as humans looked to the stars, unaware of the whispers growing in alien councils, they simply continued their work, methodical and steady, shaping the future in a way only humans could. No species dared enter human space, and for the first time, the galaxy understood the fear that had been quietly building for centuries. Humans were not just survivors. They were masters of a realm that others could only observe from a distance, learning the hard way that caution was the only wise choice. The quiet warning had been given. The galaxy had listened, and humans, as always, remained silent. The galaxy had begun to take humans seriously, but no one truly understood the scale of their capabilities. Rumors spread faster than fleets could move, and stories of vanished ships reached every star system. Still, curiosity often outweighed fear. Many species believed that they could approach human space safely if they were careful. They thought diplomacy or careful observation might finally reveal the secrets that humans had kept hidden for so long. A fleet from a distant civilization set out, claiming they were on a peaceful mission. Their ships were built for observation and negotiation, equipped with long-range sensors and diplomatic chambers. Scientists, translators, and envoys filled every vessel. They carried gifts, promises, and carefully written messages intended to reassure humans. The plan seemed reasonable. The fleet believed they were clever enough to avoid provoking humans, cautious enough to survive the journey. For weeks, the fleet traveled through space. The crew watched the stars, ran simulations, and checked their sensors constantly. They studied old reports of human anomalies, trying to understand the patterns. Every reading hinted at something extraordinary. Human systems were surrounded by energy fields that changed unpredictably, Ships that entered without permission triggered responses that seemed automatic, precise, and devastating. Yet humans themselves were nowhere in sight. As the fleet crossed into the outer limits of human space, the tension became almost unbearable. Alarms went off when sensors picked up sudden energy spikes. Communications faltered, sometimes for minutes at a time, leaving crews anxious and silent. They began to feel something they had never expected. Humans were not just powerful. They were invisible, always watching and fully in control. The fleet's captain, a seasoned officer with decades of experience, tried to maintain calm. "We must proceed carefully," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the tension he felt. "We are here to observe, not to provoke. Follow the protocols exactly. Do not react to anything unless it is necessary." For hours, nothing happened. The alien crew told themselves this was normal. Maybe humans were indifferent. Maybe they were cautious. Maybe they were simply far away. But then, suddenly, one of the smaller observation ships vanished. The sensors detected a brief surge of energy, then nothing. No debris, no signals, no trace of the crew. Just empty space. Shock swept through the fleet. Officers stared at the screens, unable to comprehend what had happened. They had studied human technology, reviewed every report, calculated every possibility, but nothing prepared them for this. The rules of engagement, the principles of physics they knew, seemed meaningless near human systems. A scientist on one of the ships whispered, almost to herself, "How can they do this without even being here?" The words captured the fear that everyone was feeling. Humans had not fired a shot. They had not attacked in anger, and yet they had the power to remove a vessel completely from existence. The fleet debated what to do next. Some argued that they should retreat immediately, warn the galaxy, and never attempt contact again. Others believed they had to continue, that this was the only chance to learn about humans before it was too late. Pride and curiosity warred with fear, leaving the command room tense and silent. Finally, the decision was made to proceed, but cautiously. The fleet adjusted its formation, kept long distances between ships, and sent encrypted signals ahead, announcing their presence in a formal, careful manner. They hoped that showing respect and non-aggression would prevent further incidents. Hours passed, and then the humans made themselves known, not in person, not visibly, but through an unmistakable display of power. A field of light surrounded the fleet, subtle at first, then growing more intense. Sensors detected a complex network of energy patterns that defied analysis. The aliens realized they were being scanned, measured, and evaluated by a force far beyond their understanding. Every maneuver they attempted to make was anticipated. Every calculation was countered before it could be executed. It became clear, humans were not just observing, they were controlling. Without firing a single shot, without sending a message, they communicated their dominance. Humans were teaching the galaxy a lesson in power and strategy, a lesson that would not be forgotten. Panic began to take hold. Officers and crew members felt the weight of their decisions. They had thought themselves prepared for anything the universe could throw at them. They had not been prepared for humans. Humans were patient, methodical, and invisible until it suited them to reveal themselves. And when they did, the consequences were absolute. The fleet decided to withdraw, slowly and carefully. Every movement was deliberate, every sensor reading monitored. Yet, even as they retreated, the humans remained invisible. There was no attack, no message, no visible fleet waiting for them. And yet the aliens felt the presence of something immense, something they could neither see nor understand fully. By the time they reached the edge of human space, the fleet was shaken. Officers looked at each other in silence, a shared understanding passing between them. Humans were not to be challenged. Every hypothesis about human limitations, every assumption about their technology, had been shattered in hours. When the fleet returned to its home system, the reports they carried spread quickly. Entire civilizations gathered to read the accounts, study the data, and analyze the implications. Analysts warned leaders that humans were no longer a species to be underestimated. Scientists calculated that human capabilities were not just advanced. They were adaptive, precise, and almost impossible to predict. Stories began to circulate about the fleets that had vanished, about the strange energy bursts and sudden disappearances. Some believed humans had weapons capable of destroying entire ships in moments. Others speculated that humans had technologies beyond comprehension, perhaps even the ability to manipulate space itself. No one could be certain. All that was clear was the growing fear that humans could dominate any situation without warning. For humans on their home planet, life continued as normal. Scientists explored distant stars, engineers built faster, more efficient ships, and strategists simulated encounters with alien civilizations. They were aware of the galaxy's curiosity and occasional probing missions, but they acted with calm precision. They did not seek war, and yet they prepared for every possibility. Humans understood that survival in the galaxy required not only strength, but foresight, intelligence, and patience. The galaxy, meanwhile, had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten. Humans were not a species to be challenged lightly. Diplomats and fleet commanders discussed the events with a mixture of awe and fear. "Do not enter human space," they said. "Observe from a distance. Do not provoke. The consequences are unknown, and we have already seen the result." As time passed, the story of the first fleet's encounter with human space became a warning. It was repeated in council chambers, in training programs, and in private conversations. Humans had demonstrated power without aggression, control without confrontation, and strategy without words. They had created a zone of fear simply by existing and observing, and humans themselves continued to expand quietly. They mapped new stars, tested new technologies, and sent exploration vessels into uncharted regions. They did not boast or threaten. They simply acted, prepared, and waited. To the galaxy, it seemed as if humans had the ability to see and respond to everything, even from a distance, without ever revealing themselves. The second chapter of humanity's reputation was now written, and it was even more compelling than the first. Humans were no longer merely mysterious. They were a force that commanded respect, caution, and fear. The first attempt at contact had failed, not because of aggression, but because humans were simply too advanced, too prepared, and too unpredictable. Across the galaxy, fleets retreated, alliances shifted, and councils debated in hushed tones. Every civilization recognized a single unspoken truth. Human space was forbidden territory. Humans were patient, intelligent, and absolute in their control. Their power was not shown through violence, but through precision, preparation, and the unshakable certainty that any threat would be neutralized before it could act. And back on Earth, life moved forward as usual. Humans continued their quiet work, unaware that their first encounter with the galaxy had changed everything. They explored the stars, developed technology, and prepared for the future, always careful, always deliberate. And the galaxy, watching from afar, finally understood the fear that humans could inspire without ever needing to fire a weapon. No species dared enter human space again, at least not willingly. Curiosity, diplomacy, and pride were replaced by caution, respect, and sometimes outright terror. Humans had made their presence known in the most subtle, most effective way possible. The lesson was clear. The galaxy could observe, it could speculate, it could wonder, but it could not challenge humans without risking complete disaster. And so, the quiet mastery of humans continued. The galaxy watched, fleets lingered at the edges of human territory, and rumors of vanished ships and strange energies grew. Humans remained focused, methodical, and calm, shaping their destiny with patience and intelligence. They were not just surviving in the galaxy, they were quietly controlling a corner of it in a way that no other species had managed before. The second chapter ended with one undeniable fact. After the first encounter, the galaxy was shaken. The fleet that had attempted contact with humans had returned in pieces, not physically but in spirit. Their reports were full of uncertainty, fear, and respect. It became clear that humans were not just strong. They were unpredictable in ways that no civilization had ever faced before. The alien species realized that the human way of operating was unlike anything they had prepared for. Across star systems, leaders called emergency meetings. Analysts studied every piece of data the fleet had returned with. They pored over energy readings, calculations of human ship capabilities, and even the faintest communication anomalies. Every expert agreed on one point. Humans were advancing faster than any species had ever recorded. Their technology was precise, adaptable, and terrifyingly effective. "This cannot be a coincidence," one officer said during a council session. Humans did not destroy the fleet in anger. They didn't fire weapons. They simply neutralized the situation. His words hung in the air and no one challenged him. It was true. Humans had proven, without a single aggressive act, that any intrusion into their space could be fatal. Rumors of what humans were capable of began to spread, growing with every retelling. Some spoke of ships being removed from existence as if swallowed by the void. Others suggested humans could see every movement in their territory before it happened. The exact truth was unknown, and that uncertainty made humans even more dangerous in the eyes of the galaxy. Some species, proud and experienced in diplomacy, insisted on finding a solution. "We cannot simply avoid humans forever," one council member argued. "We must understand them. We must find a way to communicate safely. If we ignore this, we risk more fleets disappearing, more misunderstandings, and possibly war." Others were less confident. They had seen the reports, the patterns, and the results of even minor incursions. They argued that humans had already demonstrated complete control of their space. Any attempt at negotiation or exploration risked disaster. Slowly, the majority began to agree. Fear, combined with respect, was shaping the galaxy's approach. Meanwhile, humans continued their work as usual. On Earth and the other colonies, they tested new ships, improved communication systems, and refined defense strategies. Humans were aware of the galaxy's growing attention, but they did not act out of malice or pride. Every decision was calculated, every step deliberate. They understood that power alone was not enough. Strategy, preparation, and restraint were equally important. The humans' intelligence agencies had long predicted that other species would eventually attempt contact. They had simulations of every scenario, contingency plans for every possibility. They had prepared quietly, ensuring that if the day came, they could respond decisively without revealing more than necessary. Humans believed in subtlety and efficiency. It was their way to maintain safety without unnecessary conflict. Back in the council chambers, debate raged. Some representatives argued for caution, some for diplomacy, some for force. No one could agree on a single plan. The reports of vanished fleets and strange energy readings had left everyone uneasy. Every simulation failed to account fully for human behavior. The more they tried to understand humans, the more elusive the answers became. One scientist suggested a demonstration, a controlled encounter to gauge human capabilities. The idea was controversial. "We must be extremely careful," she warned. "We are not dealing with ordinary species. Any misstep could be fatal. We need to approach as gently as possible, without revealing our intentions, but with enough presence to draw a response." A fleet was assembled for the demonstration. It consisted of lightly armed ships and observation vessels, carefully prepared to minimize risk. Every officer, scientist, and diplomat knew the danger they were walking into. Yet despite their fear, curiosity pushed them forward. Humanity's power was undeniable, and the galaxy needed to understand it, or risk greater consequences in the future. The fleet advanced cautiously into human space. Sensors constantly scanned for signs of human ships, energy fields, or automated defenses. They detected minor anomalies but could not identify their source. Every system behaved differently than expected, and every attempt to analyze human territory in real time failed. The humans had built something that was both invisible and omnipresent, a system that could detect, respond, and neutralize threats with precision and without visible action. Suddenly, one of the smaller observation ships reported a spike in energy readings. The sensors went haywire. The officers tried to stabilize them, but every attempt to communicate or maneuver was countered by unseen forces. It became obvious that the humans were monitoring the fleet, analyzing its every move. It was not hostility, it was control. Humans were teaching them a lesson without firing a weapon, without issuing a warning, without revealing themselves directly. Panic started to spread through the fleet. Officers tried to reason with the situation, but their training and knowledge were useless here. They realized that humans were not reactive in the way other species were. They did not wait for conflict. They anticipated, adapted, and executed flawlessly. The fleet captain ordered a halt. Every attempt to move closer or further was calculated to avoid triggering an unknown response. Even the act of withdrawing had to be done carefully. Humans had demonstrated that they could manipulate space and energy in ways no alien crew had ever experienced. Every decision mattered, every misstep could have catastrophic consequences. Hours passed in tense silence. Crew members were exhausted, their nerves frayed. They had entered human space expecting diplomacy, observation, or peaceful contact. Instead, they faced an invisible force that dictated the terms without revealing itself. The humans were not trying to scare them. but their very existence, their preparation, and their precision was terrifying. When the fleet finally reached the outer edge of human space, the tension did not ease. Sensors had recorded vast energy networks, automated monitoring systems, and signals that could not be interpreted. Human space was alive, controlled by a species that had mastered anticipation, calculation, and precision. Even in retreat, the aliens felt the presence of humans as a force they could neither confront nor avoid completely. Back in their home systems, the fleet's reports sparked intense debate. Some called for immediate avoidance, rerouting trade, and suspending exploration near human space. Others were fascinated, trying to understand the mechanics of what they had witnessed. The truth remained elusive. Humans had shown capability beyond anything the galaxy had seen, and every attempt to explain it created more questions than answers. Meanwhile, humans continued to operate normally. Ships moved quietly through the stars, research continued, and colonies expanded. They observed the galaxy but did not interfere unless necessary. Humans valued control, preparation, and intelligence over aggression. They understood that their presence alone was enough to command respect and caution from the galaxy. Stories began to emerge among alien populations. Fleet captains told of the energy spikes, the invisible defenses, and the precise neutralization of threats. Rumors spread about humans' ability to anticipate actions before they were taken. Even those who had never approached human space began to treat it as forbidden territory. Curiosity was replaced by fear, exploration by caution. Humans had achieved something rare in galactic history. They had created dominance without aggression, control without visibility, and fear without provocation. They did not need to threaten or attack. Their planning, intelligence, and capability were enough. For the first time, a species had made its space untouchable simply by being prepared and methodical. In the quiet moments on Earth, humans continued their work. Scientists analyzed cosmic phenomena. Engineers tested new technologies, and strategists simulated encounters with other species. They did not act out of pride or fear. They acted because they valued survival, knowledge, and the ability to protect themselves. The galaxy, on the other hand, had learned its lesson. Human space was no longer a curiosity, it was a warning. Diplomats and fleet commanders understood that intrusion into human territory could be fatal, and every civilization recalculated its strategies accordingly. Humans had not declared war, they had not fired a shot, yet the effect was absolute. Alien councils and leaders now operated under a single unspoken rule: do not enter human space. Observation, exploration, and diplomacy all had to respect that invisible boundary. Humans had demonstrated power, control, and foresight without ever revealing their full capabilities. They had rewritten the rules of engagement without a single visible confrontation, and humans continued to expand quietly. Their colonies grew, their technologies improved, and their understanding of the universe deepened. They observed the galaxy, aware of its attention but never reacting unnecessarily. Their power lay in preparation, intelligence, and patience, qualities that the galaxy had learned to fear. Humans were no longer just another species in the stars. They were a presence to be respected, an invisible force that could control situations without aggression, and a reminder that the galaxy's assumptions about power, technology, and strategy were incomplete. The third chapter ended with the galaxy realizing something profound. Humans did not need to fight to win. They did not need to declare war to enforce boundaries. Their intelligence, the galaxy had begun to understand that humans were different. After the reports from the First Fleet, every civilization treated human space with caution. Yet curiosity and ambition were never fully extinguished. Some species still wanted to see humans directly, to test their limits, to find out if the stories of vanished fleets and strange energy patterns were true. A new expedition was organized, smaller than the previous one but more prepared, or so they believed. The fleet consisted of lightly armed ships, observation vessels, and research teams. They carried gifts, data, and carefully written messages intended to show respect. The crews were nervous but proud, convinced that humans could be approached with intelligence and diplomacy. For weeks, the fleet traveled toward the outer edge of human space. The officers and scientists analyzed every reading, scanned every system, and double-checked every calculation. They had learned from the previous expedition. They kept communication channels open, maintained tight formations, and monitored each other for signs of danger. Every movement was cautious, deliberate, precise. As they approached human territory, the anomalies began again. Sensors fluctuated unpredictably. Energy spikes appeared and disappeared in seconds. Communications were disrupted for brief moments, leaving officers anxious. Even the most experienced captains felt their confidence waver. Humans were not just observing. They were controlling, calculating, and responding in ways that could not be predicted. One evening, as the fleet crossed a border of human space, a subtle shift occurred. A small research ship detected a low-energy pulse, almost imperceptible yet distinct. The crew analyzed it carefully, debating what it could be. Was it a natural phenomenon, or was it humans signaling their presence? Before they could answer, another pulse appeared, this time stronger, and then a third, rhythmic and precise. The humans had made themselves known, not through aggression, but through demonstration. They had revealed a presence that was undeniable, powerful, and fully in control. Every ship in the alien fleet felt it, though none could see it. It was as if human space itself was alive, responding to every action with perfect precision. The fleet commander ordered the ships to hold position. "Do not react," he said. "We do not know what we are facing. Stay calm, stay together, and observe. Our priority is survival." The words were meant to reassure, but even he could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on the crew. The pulses intensified, forming a complex network of energy that wrapped around the fleet. Sensors went haywire. Instruments recorded patterns that defied analysis. It was clear. The humans were capable of manipulating energy on a scale that was almost incomprehensible. Yet there was no attack, no warning, no message. Just presence, control, power. The crew struggled to interpret what they were seeing. Some scientists suggested that humans had automated defense systems capable of neutralizing threats instantly. Others speculated that humans could detect every movement in their territory before it happened. Whatever the truth, one fact was undeniable. Any intrusion into human space was dangerous. Hours passed in tense silence. The fleet could not move closer without risking the unknown, and retreating was equally uncertain. Every action they attempted was countered in subtle ways. Ships seemed to be guided, corrected, or slowed by invisible forces. It was not aggression, it was demonstration. Humans were showing the galaxy exactly why their space was not to be entered. Finally, the humans made the demonstration even clearer. Without warning, a pattern of lights appeared in space, faint at first, then growing stronger. Energy fields shifted, creating shapes and signals that could be interpreted by the sensors, but only barely. It was a calculated display of power. Humans could strike anywhere, anytime, and neutralize a fleet without firing a shot. The alien officers realized they were being tested, observed, measured. The humans had created a display of capability so precise, so undeniable, that it left no room for argument. Every calculation, every precaution, every careful approach had been anticipated. The humans were not reactive. They were predictive, strategic, and absolute in control. Panic began to spread among the crews. Some wanted to flee immediately. Others debated whether to continue, driven by pride and curiosity. But the decision became irrelevant. The humans had demonstrated their power so effectively that any action seemed futile. The fleet had been measured, observed, and reminded of their limitations without a single shot fired. When the fleet finally decided to withdraw, they did so slowly, cautiously, aware of every subtle signal, every fluctuation of energy. Humans remained invisible, silent yet omnipresent. The lesson had been learned. Intrusion into human space was not an act of diplomacy. It was an invitation to disaster. By the time the fleet reached safe distance, the reports were already filling alien communication networks. Analysts and strategists debated what they had seen. Some called it a warning. Others called it proof that humans were beyond their understanding. Every civilization began to reevaluate their approach to human space, realizing that caution was the only reasonable path. Humans, on the other hand, continued their work as usual. They observed, analyzed, and prepared quietly, unaware of the full impact their demonstration had on the galaxy. They had no need for recognition or fear. They only needed security, intelligence, and readiness. Across star systems, the story of the human demonstration spread quickly. Fleets were delayed, trade routes altered, and diplomatic missions postponed. Humans had made it clear that their space was controlled, precise, and dangerous. The galaxy had finally begun to respect the boundary humans had silently established. Even the most curious and ambitious species understood the lesson. Human power was not about aggression or domination. It was about preparation, intelligence, and the ability to act decisively without warning. The demonstration had shown that humans were masters of strategy, control, and observation. The fleet that returned shared their experiences with councils, leaders, and fleets across the galaxy. Every detail was analyzed, debated, and studied. Humans had not attacked. They had not communicated directly. Yet their control was absolute, their influence undeniable. It was the most effective demonstration of power the galaxy had ever witnessed. Back on Earth, humans remained unaware of the ripple they had caused. Their colonies expanded, research continued, and new technologies were tested. Every step was calculated, deliberate, and methodical. They valued intelligence, preparation, and patience over aggression or display. Their power was evident, but they chose not to wield it unnecessarily. The galaxy, however, had learned the limits of its curiosity. Humans had established a presence that was untouchable without overt confrontation. They had demonstrated capability without violence, dominance without attack, and precision without effort. Every species understood that human space was forbidden, not by decree but by the undeniable power humans had shown. Stories of the demonstration became cautionary tales. Fleet commanders shared them in training. Diplomats referenced them in meetings. Scientists studied the energy patterns, hoping to understand what humans had done. The demonstration had been so effective that humans became more than a species. They became a concept. Humans were now synonymous with caution, intelligence, and the unchallengeable. And humans continued their quiet work, exploring the stars, developing technology, and preparing for the future. They did not need recognition or fear. They only needed safety and control. Their demonstration had spoken for them, and the galaxy had listened. The fourth chapter ended with a single truth. Humans had shown their power without aggression, control without confrontation, and strategy without words. The galaxy would never forget the demonstration, and no species would ever underestimate human space again. Humans were not just survivors. They were masters of their territory, and any attempt to challenge them would be met with precision, intelligence, and consequences beyond comprehension. After the demonstration, the galaxy began to change its behavior toward human space. The fleets that had approached before now moved cautiously even in distant systems. Trade routes were rerouted, exploration missions delayed, and diplomatic missions reconsidered. Entire civilizations began to realize that humans were no longer just another species. They were a force that could not be challenged without severe consequences. In council chambers across the galaxy, leaders debated the meaning of the human demonstration. Analysts presented reports, energy readings, and fleet records. The same conclusion emerged again and again. Humans were highly intelligent, prepared, and fully in control of their territory. They were not aggressive, but their capability was undeniable. Every civilization had to reconsider its strategy. Some species acted quickly. Fleets that had previously monitored human systems were withdrawn. Colonies near the edges of human space were abandoned, and the borders were clearly marked as forbidden. Diplomats sent messages warning their governments to avoid intrusion. The message was simple. Humans had the power, precision, and foresight to make any violation of their space costly beyond measure. Despite the fear, some species could not resist curiosity. A small group of scientists argued that humans might be approachable through careful observation. "We cannot stop learning," one said. "We must study them, understand their technology, and see if there is a way to cooperate. Perhaps humans are not hostile. They just protect themselves." Even these cautious scientists had to admit that the risks were enormous. Every report of the vanished fleets, every recorded energy pattern, and every simulation suggested that humans were far more advanced than any civilization had expected. The humans were strategic, patient, and invisible until they chose to reveal themselves. To challenge them directly was unthinkable. Human colonies continued to expand quietly during this period. On the home planet, scientists worked on deep space exploration projects, engineers tested new propulsion systems, and strategists ran simulations for potential encounters with alien civilizations. They were aware that the galaxy was watching, but they did not act aggressively or boastfully. Every action was deliberate, methodical, and designed to maintain security without provocation. The humans' quiet expansion only reinforced the galaxy's fear. The evidence was clear. Humans were prepared for any threat, and they had demonstrated their ability to neutralize fleets without firing a weapon. It was not brute force that made humans dangerous, it was intelligence, strategy, and the ability to act with precision when necessary. In some systems, fleets were deliberately rerouted to avoid human space entirely. Exploratory missions were canceled or delayed indefinitely. Trade between neighboring civilizations was carefully monitored to ensure no ships accidentally entered human territory. The galaxy had learned to respect the boundaries humans had silently established. Some alien leaders tried to understand the logic behind humans' actions. "They do not attack, yet they are untouchable," one council member remarked. "They prepare, observe, and calculate. Their strength lies not in aggression, but in control, foresight, and patience. We have never faced a species like this before." Across multiple star systems, the word spread. Humans were not to be challenged. They had created dominance without violence and fear without confrontation. The impact was profound. Even the most ambitious fleets, the ones that had once dreamed of exploration or diplomacy in human space, now moved with extreme caution or avoided the region entirely. Meanwhile, humans continued their work undisturbed. Colonies on distant planets explored new resources, research stations pushed the limits of technology, and new fleets were built for deep space exploration. Every project was calculated with care. Humans valued knowledge, preparation, and observation over conflict or confrontation. The alien civilizations slowly realized that humans were shaping the galaxy without seeking to dominate it openly. They were establishing control by being capable, precise, and intelligent. They had set the rules simply by existing. Humans had created a zone that no fleet dared enter, a space that was untouchable, not through aggression, but through preparation and strategy. Reports of the human demonstrations circulated widely. Fleet commanders studied the energy patterns, strategists calculated the risks, and diplomats warned their governments. Even those who had never approached human space knew the unspoken rule: do not intrude. Curiosity and pride were no longer enough to risk fleets or crews. The humans had achieved something rare in the galaxy. They had created respect and fear without ever declaring war. The human presence, quiet and unassuming on the surface, was more powerful than anyone could imagine. Their ability to anticipate and neutralize threats, their precise coordination of fleets, and their methodical approach to defense were unmatched. The galaxy slowly accepted that humans were not a species to be underestimated. As fleets withdrew and colonies were abandoned near human borders, humans continued their quiet work. They explored new star systems, developed new technologies, and studied the universe. They were aware of the galaxy's observation, but did not act hastily or aggressively. Every action was guided by intelligence, foresight, and caution. Humans understood that true strength was not in destruction, but in preparation, planning, and control. Over time, the galaxy established a clear rule: human space was forbidden. Any attempt to enter was too dangerous, too uncertain, and too likely to result in disaster. The humans had not issued threats or engaged in violence, yet the consequences of crossing their space were understood by all. The rule spread through fleets, councils, and trade networks, creating a silent but unbreakable barrier. Some alien scientists attempted to study human behavior from afar. They observed human colonies, measured energy readings, and simulated encounters. Yet the more they learned, the less certain they became. Humans were too precise, too prepared, and too unpredictable. The galaxy could not calculate the full extent of human capability, which only reinforced the fear. Humans continued to operate with calm and methodical precision. They expanded their colonies, built fleets, and advanced their technology, always quietly, always deliberately. Their power was evident, yet it was never flaunted. The galaxy had seen demonstration enough to understand that any challenge to humans would be unwise. Over the next cycles, the galaxy fully adjusted to this new reality. Exploration missions were limited, fleets were cautious, and diplomacy avoided human space altogether. Humans had created control without conflict, fear without confrontation, and dominance without aggression. They had set the rules of engagement simply by being prepared, intelligent, and methodical. The fifth chapter ended with the galaxy's complete recognition. Humans were untouchable in their own space. The demonstration had achieved its goal. Humans did not need to fight to control their territory. They had shown, without aggression, that their presence alone was enough to enforce respect and caution across the stars. Humans continued to observe, expand, and prepare, fully aware of the galaxy's attention but undisturbed by it. They were not conquerors, not aggressors. They were masters of their space through intelligence, planning, and foresight. The galaxy had learned the hard lesson. Human space was off limits, and the humans themselves were not to be underestimated. The quiet withdrawal of fleets, the careful rerouting of trade, and the complete respect for human territory marked a turning point in galactic history. Humans had achieved a level of control and respect that no other species had managed. They had proven that preparation, intelligence, and patience could create dominance without a single act of aggression. The galaxy had begun to live with this reality. Humans were everywhere in their own space, exploring, observing, and preparing, but they remained largely invisible to other species. Yet the lessons they had taught were clear. Fear, respect, and caution became the standard response to any approach toward human space. Humans had not sought conflict, yet the galaxy had learned to avoid them. Their dominance was quiet, deliberate, and absolute. Every species understood that challenging humans was not only unwise but potentially fatal. The humans had demonstrated control through intelligence and preparation, proving that the strongest power was not always in weapons or fleets but in strategy, foresight, and calm confidence. And as humans quietly expanded across the stars, the galaxy learned an important truth. The humans did not need to fight to be feared. They had achieved something no other species had: control without aggression, respect without threat, and a presence so commanding that even the most curious civilizations dared not cross their borders. The fifth chapter closed with the galaxy withdrawing entirely from human space, fleets redirected, trade routes altered, and the knowledge spreading that humans were untouchable in their own territory. Humans continued their work quietly, methodically, and efficiently, proving that true power did not always need to be shown. It only needed to exist, prepared, precise, and unstoppable. After years of careful observation, cautious approaches, and failed attempts to challenge or understand them, the galaxy finally accepted the truth. Humans were a force unlike any other. Their space had become untouchable, their presence commanding, and their intelligence undeniable. No civilization dared enter their territory, and every species had learned to respect the invisible boundaries humans had established without issuing a single threat. The withdrawal of fleets, the rerouting of trade, and the avoidance of human space became standard policy. Even the most ambitious explorers and the most daring diplomats recognized that humans were not to be provoked. Curiosity still existed, of course, but it was tempered by caution. Every fleet commander, every strategist, every scientist understood that humans had demonstrated a level of control, foresight, and precision that could not be matched. Despite the galaxy's fear and respect, humans continued their work quietly, methodically, and deliberately. Their colonies expanded across distant stars, research stations studied unknown phenomena, and fleets tested new technologies. Every project was calculated, every move prepared. They had no desire to dominate others, no need to boast, and no intent to fight unless absolutely necessary. Their strength lay in preparation, intelligence, and patience, the quiet confidence that comes from knowing one is ready for anything. In the meantime, the galaxy watched from afar. Alien civilizations recorded the patterns, analyzed the energy signatures, and studied the reports of vanished fleets. They tried to predict human behavior, to anticipate any possible response to intrusion. Yet the more they studied, the less they understood. Humans had created a system of defense, observation, and control so advanced that it defied comprehension. Every approach, every signal, every fleet movement had been considered in advance. Humans were not reactive, they were proactive, prepared, and decisive. Some species attempted to communicate cautiously, sending encrypted messages or diplomatic signals across the void. Their intention was simple: to establish contact without crossing boundaries. But even these careful attempts were met with silence. Humans did not respond unless they deemed it necessary, and even then, their communication was deliberate, measured, and precise. It was not arrogance, it was strategy. They had learned that the galaxy could observe, speculate, and provoke without fully understanding the consequences. Silence was often the most effective response. Meanwhile, humans continued to explore the stars, expanding their reach in a way that was subtle but effective. They tested new propulsion systems, explored distant planets, and studied cosmic phenomena that no other civilization had yet reached. Every advancement was deliberate, every step calculated. Humans valued knowledge, preparation, and understanding above aggression or confrontation. They were patient, but always aware of the galaxy's attention. Reports of the humans' capability continued to circulate across alien systems. Stories of vanished fleets, precise energy control, and anticipatory strategy became part of the galaxy's history. They were no longer rumors, they were undeniable truths. Humans had demonstrated their power without a single act of hostility. They had created fear, respect, and caution simply through preparation and intelligence. Alien civilizations began to accept that human space was untouchable. Fleet movements were limited, exploration routes were adjusted, and diplomacy avoided human territory. Even the most ambitious empires understood that challenging humans was not worth the risk. They had learned that intelligence, strategy, and preparation could be more powerful than brute force. Humans had achieved dominance without aggression, proving that power could exist quietly, unseen, and unchallenged. Within human space, life continued with focus and purpose. Scientists studied the stars, engineers tested new ships, and strategists prepared for every conceivable scenario. Humans understood that the galaxy was watching, and they valued security and readiness above all else. Every fleet, every colony, every mission was part of a broader strategy to ensure survival, knowledge, and control without unnecessary conflict. The effect on the galaxy was profound. Entire civilizations began to operate with the understanding that human space was forbidden. Fleets were rerouted, colonies moved further away from human borders, and trade networks were adjusted to avoid accidental incursions. Fear had become respect, and respect had become policy. Humans had created a boundary that could not be crossed, not through threats or war, but through intelligence, strategy, and quiet preparation. As humans expanded and observed, they also began to understand the galaxy more deeply. They studied civilizations from afar, monitored trade routes, and analyzed fleet movements. Yet even with all their observation, humans remained cautious. They did not seek conflict, nor did they engage in domination. Every decision was calculated, every action deliberate. They understood that patience, intelligence, and precision were the greatest weapons of all. Over time, humans became a symbol in the galaxy. To some, they represented caution and fear. To others, they were a model of strategic mastery. Every fleet, every civilization, every diplomat knew the unspoken rule. Human space was forbidden. Humans had demonstrated control, intelligence, and precision in a way that no species had ever managed. Their presence alone was enough to command respect and caution. In councils and strategy rooms, alien leaders discussed humans constantly. They debated how to interact, how to avoid missteps, and how to respect the invisible boundaries. Yet, even with careful planning, no one felt confident in predicting human behavior. Humans had demonstrated that they could anticipate actions before they were taken, neutralize threats without aggression, and maintain control over vast regions of space. Despite all this attention, humans remained unaware of the full impact they had on the galaxy. They continued to expand quietly, explore carefully, and develop technology methodically. They did not seek recognition, and they did not crave fear. They only sought security, knowledge, and understanding. Every move was part of a deliberate strategy to ensure survival, growth, and the ability to act decisively when necessary. The galaxy, meanwhile, had fully adjusted to the reality of human dominance. Fleets no longer approached human space lightly. Diplomacy avoided the region entirely. Trade and exploration were limited, with the clear understanding that humans were untouchable in their territory. Even curiosity, a driving force for many species, was tempered by fear. Humans had created boundaries that no one dared cross. Boundaries enforced not by weapons or fleets, but by intelligence, strategy, and quiet power. Humans had accomplished something extraordinary. They had established dominance without war, control without aggression, and fear without confrontation. The galaxy had learned to respect them, not because of threats, but because of capability, foresight, and preparation. Every civilization had observed, every fleet had tested, and every strategy had failed to overcome the humans' subtle mastery of their space. As humans quietly expanded their colonies and fleets, they also expanded their understanding of the galaxy. They observed civilizations, monitored energy readings, and studied cosmic phenomena. Every new discovery was deliberate, every experiment calculated. Humans understood that intelligence, preparation, and patience were more powerful than weapons or fleets. The final lesson had been learned by the galaxy. Humans were masters of their space, untouchable without provocation, and capable of controlling situations with precision beyond comprehension. They had demonstrated that true strength was not in aggression, but in preparation, foresight, and intelligence. And so, humans continued their work, quietly shaping their future. The galaxy observed, fleets withdrew, and civilizations adjusted their strategies. Humans had proven that dominance could exist without conflict, fear could exist without war, and control could exist without visibility. The invisible power of humans became a defining reality across the stars. In the end, humans had achieved something rare. They had created a galaxy-wide respect for their space, not through threats, not through war, not through aggression, but through intelligence, planning, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing one is prepared for anything. Their power was subtle, precise, and undeniable. The sixth chapter closed with a final truth. Humans had transformed the galaxy's perception of strength. They had shown that true power lies not in destruction, but in preparation, foresight, and the ability to act decisively. The galaxy understood fear, respect, and caution because humans had taught it without firing a shot. Humans were not conquerors, aggressors, or rulers. They were observers, planners, and masters of their space. Their dominance was silent but absolute. Their control was precise, and their presence was enough to command respect across the stars. The galaxy had learned that some power needs no words. No fleets and no weapons, it only needs readiness, intelligence, and patience, and with that, humans continued quietly, methodically, and confidently, shaping their destiny in a galaxy that had finally learned to fear, respect, and acknowledge their presence. The galaxy would never again underestimate the humans, for their power had been demonstrated, their intelligence revealed, and their mastery unquestionable.